Welcome to another episode of the Drop Bear Downpour podcast. I am your host, Danielle Drop Bear Curtis, and today I'll be bringing you another two-part interview with a very good friend of mine, Dimitri Petridis. Now, if you know Dim, you probably know him because of his Muay Thai career and his devastating leg kicks. So in this first episode, we do talk about how Dim got into combat sports, how he found Muay Thai, what it was like fighting before CSA existed. There's an interesting story in there about fighting with rugby headgear. Also throughout the episode, there are a couple of furry special guests, and just a quick note that there was a little bit of tech issues, so there's a couple of moments where the video is gone, but if you are on an audio only platform, there is no interruption and you won't notice. And then we do end up talking about, you know, how and why Dim transitioned into MMA. So I'm definitely excited to bring you this one. One last thing before we do jump into the episode, I want to give a very big shout out to our first ever supporter of the podcast, Erin Shoulders. Now, for those of you who don't know, Erin is actually my little sister, and she somehow found the link to support the podcast before I had even advertised it on our Instagram page. So a massive shout out goes to Erin. If anyone else would like to have a shout out on the podcast, or you just like to support the podcast, you can find our support the podcast link in our bio on our Instagram page. That's Drop Bear Downpour on Instagram. But without further ado, let's get into the episode. Take it away, Dim.
Yeah, I've done that before as well. I remember weighed in at one of my fights in Toowoomba, and it was at a pub as well.
Yeah,
and it was just like, it was a good fight night, but yeah, the weigh-ins were just, I was surrounded by people who were just like, what's going on? I was like, oh, I'm fighting tomorrow night. I was like, oh, are you fighting here? Like, no, this is just the weigh-ins.
Yeah.
And people were just like watching you. Like, you have no idea what's going on.
Fascinated.
But they're just like sitting there chowing down, and you're like, I just want to eat that schnitzel.
And because you walk in and the whole place smells of food.
Oh, it's so
that's
hard
the worst
to deal
thing.
with. Yeah. I've had some interesting weigh-ins. Some of them, some dodgy weigh-ins, hey?
Yeah.
You rock up. I've had the amount of, like, in my amateur Muay Thai career, the amount of weigh-ins I had where my opponents apparently had weighed in somewhere else. And I'm like, really?
See, I find MMA is very stringent though. Like that doesn't really happen in MMA. I don't really think that happens super frequently in Muay Thai anymore either.
I think they're a bit better at it now, but when I first started.
Well, CSA wasn't around when you started. So
Yeah. It was just promoters be like, oh yeah, he'll just weigh in at our gym and we'll just tell you.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, bro. I'd like to see him actually weigh in, because with a couple of guys, I'm like, yeah, you're not 78 kilos.
Yeah. Yes. Alrighty, well, let's get into it, and I'm going to actually introduce you. So, guys, welcome back to the Drop Bear Downpour podcast, and we actually have our second guest ever, Dimitri Petridis. Did I say that one right?
You did, yes. Yeah, you nailed it.
I know that people generally tend to butcher your name.
They do, often. Yeah, I'm used to it now.
Although I feel like by now I should definitely know how to say your name.
Yeah, it's been a while, so I'd hope so.
So Dim and I actually used to train together when I lived here in Canberra for quite some time, and I actually learned a lot from Dim. He helped me with my striking when I was just starting. So, Dim has been training for quite some time.
Yeah, probably close to 16 years now.
Yeah. Do you want to give us just a little bit of an intro to you? Obviously, tell us about your fighting, but tell us about you personally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start with how I came into combat sports to start. I was playing rugby at school, and I found myself to be a little bit too physical for rugby as well. So my dad
didn't think that was a thing.
No, my dad pulled me aside and he was like, listen, you want to find another sport where you're allowed to actually hit people and not get in trouble for it? I thought, yeah, sure, no worries. So I ended up finding Muay Thai and starting that, quitting rugby after I finished school, and then just taking that up full time since I was 18.
So did your dad always know about Muay Thai?
No, he actually didn't. So he was more thinking about boxing or something or anything like that.
Yeah.
My original coach, Peter, he was actually the baker for the cafe that I worked for, so his business was a bakery in Canberra, and he would deliver bread to us every morning. And I can't remember how exactly it happened, but we ended up having a conversation where he was like, "Oh yeah, I train fighters. I do Muay Thai," and my dad was like, "Perfect, you're going to see him." And yeah, the next day, then that week, I went down to his place, and it was just in his garage at his house. And first session, I'd only done a little bit of boxing. First session was a sparring session. He's like, "All right, you got a mouth guard?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Put your gloves on and let's go." And I got beaten up bad by these boys. They beat the hell out of me.
That's old school, like training for you right there. Yeah,
and then
thrown into the fire.
Legit, yeah. And then my dad picked me up after an hour. And I'm battered and bruised. He goes, "How'd you find it?" I'm like, "Oh, I loved it."
Instantly for you.
Yeah, 100%. Instantly. I got the shit beat out of me and I couldn't wait to go back.
Same.
Yeah. And then, every Tuesday, Thursday afternoons for like an hour and a half, I'd go to his place, just get beat up until I started slowly getting beaten up less.
Yeah.
And
I remember the first time I came out there to train with you, or maybe it may not have been the first time. It was the first time when Peter was actually there. And I remember seeing you guys sparring without shin guards on as well.
Yes.
Like you had gloves on, but no shinnies.
No shinnies. I didn't put on my first pair of shin guards until I started training MMA about 2 years ago. So shin guards to me were a foreign concept unless I went to visit another gym. Like a couple of times we'd go to Stockade and they're like, "Have you got shin guards?" I'm like, "Oh, do you have a spare pair? Because we don't use them."
Yeah. So how do you think that impacted you? Because obviously we all know that you like to kick.
I do.
And
yes. I'm a kicker.
You're a kicker. You're a very good kicker. And you actually have some stoppages via kicks, essentially.
I do. Yeah. Well, it actually really shaped how I'd say how tough we were at that gym as opposed to like in the sense of actual physical conditioning.
Yeah.
So our training was quite hard on the body in the sense that because we weren't using shin pads and barely any protection, we could take a bit of punishment.
Yeah, you were used to that already.
Yeah, and so we would find ourselves after fights not in as much pain as our opponents. Like, you know, when even if win or lose, you'd sit in the back room and you'd be like, "Oh, I'm a bit sore," and then you hear your opponent being like, "I am really fucking sore.
They can't walk.
They can't walk," and we got no problem. That's kind of how our coach wanted us to be. And then, that helped us really develop our kicking styles. And I just, really fell in love with kicking. So I got strong legs, and that really helped me develop my technique as well. Because when you're sparring without shin pads on, you have to be picky with your kicks. You can't just wail on someone, because when you got shin pads on, you can get away with a bit. Like if you clash shins, you're like, "No, okay."
You can also sort of lull yourself into that false sense of security. And as you said, the conditioning, like I guess a lot of times now people supplement it, like obviously heaps of pad sessions, heaps of heavy bags or kicking things. But in terms of like if you're always kicking people, one, you have to learn pretty quickly how to be a good training partner.
That too. Yeah, super important.
Because you can't just be going around and kicking people.
Yeah.
But I guess if you were to rock up day one and try and kick someone as hard as possible and they checked it, you'd learn very quickly.
Yeah. And that was the big thing. That's exactly right. Like you'd learn how to, be a good training partner, learn how to control your kicks in sparring, but also know how to set up your kicks. So often you find guys, they learn how to set their kicks up with their punches and stuff like that. But when you got shin pads on, you can sometimes get a bit lazy because it doesn't hurt when you make a mistake.
Exactly.
When you make a mistake without shin pads on, you kick someone's elbow, you kick someone's knee or their shin, it hurts. And you're like, "Well, fuck, I can't do that again."
I need to make sure I place these kicks correctly.
Yeah, so it really makes you accurate. And like a lot of the time you hear some of my training partners go, even when we're sparring and it's not hard, it's like, "You don't hit hard, but you hit me in the same spot every single time." And that's just from learning how to place my kicks perfectly because of the fact that I wasn't using shin guards for so long. So they had to be perfect.
Exactly. Did you ever have any sort of like injuries or in that initial phase from doing that, or any times where you probably couldn't train for a while? Like I'm sure at the beginning you probably had some times where you hobbled home.
Yeah. Not so much injuries, but definitely the first probably I'd say couple of years, my shins were probably permanently swollen and sore. Because It just
constant.
hurts so bad all the time. So, I'd be walking around at school and someone would bump my shins and I'd just be in pain. And so sometimes you'd be like, listen, Pete, I can't kick tonight. He's like, yeah, no worries, just box.
Yeah.
So you make concessions for it. But we're still kicking pads and stuff, but just no sparring.
Yeah, of course.
He'd give you a night off.
Yeah, he'd give you a night off of that shin-on-shin contact.
Yeah, yeah. But no major injuries. I was really lucky with injuries, actually, my whole fight career up until I blew my ACL. And that was later on.
And then you went on a bit of a run of unluckiness, I'll say.
Yes, I did. Then it was a bit of a run of unluckiness. I had hands, feet, broken, thumb.
Yeah, I think, though, that goes to show, and I think what that demonstrates, though, is that you are also a good athlete. Like, as in, you have always done strength and conditioning, which is one of those things that lowers that risk of injury, because 100%. You're always working on those other things other than just being a good fighter. If you're working on trying to be a good athlete as well, it's not just about being fitter, faster, stronger. It's also about less likely to be injured as well.
100%. I think strength conditioning now, it's starting to catch up with the training of fighters where they know how important it is. There's a fine line between treating strength conditioning as the most important part and as supplementary to your fight training. And a lot of athletes, they go too far one way or the other. And you'll find what you're trying to do with your strength conditioning is to just, one, build up your resilience to damage. So making sure your body is just a little bit more resilient. You can't really injury-proof your body. It's impossible.
Oh, of course.
But you can always reduce the risk of injury through being a bit stronger, being a bit more agile, your proprioception. These things are really important for any athlete, and particularly combat sports athletes.
Absolutely.
But sometimes some fighters go too far and they just start doing too many weights, too much strength conditioning. You're like,
at the end of the day,
you're taking away your time from in the actual gym learning your sport.
Exactly. At the end of the day, you want to be a good athlete to help you become a better fighter. But if you're not trying and focusing on being a good fighter, then what's the point? Like, if you want to be a weightlifter, cool.
Be a weightlifter.
Be a weightlifter. Yeah. If you want to be a runner, cool, be a runner. Yes. But at the end of the day, if you want to fight, you need to know how to fight.
And train fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah. The conditioning part of strength conditioning, like 80, 90% of your conditioning should come from training the sport you want. And that's for any sport.
Yep.
Yeah. It's doing the pads. It's doing the hard rounds, the heavy rolling, all that kind of stuff. That's what's going to make you a better fighter.
Because nothing can replicate that either.
No, you can't. And that's where a lot of other athletes also, and strength and conditioning coaches, fall into the trap, is they're like, oh yeah, like do a landmine punch. It's like, that's not going to help you punch harder. I fucking hate the landmine punch. It's the most overrated, Instagrammable fucking exercise that every strength conditioning coach for combat sports athletes makes them do because it looks cool. It's like, yeah, we're throwing a punch. It's like, you're not. You're doing a landmine press.
Yes.
This doesn't make you a better puncher.
And it doesn't translate either.
It doesn't.
At the end of the day, it's such a small, like very small portion of the actual movement that you go through when you throw a punch. Like that's like the end extension, but not even that, because you shouldn't really be going all the way either.
Exactly. Like if you want to generate power in a punch, you should be looking at the athlete's ability to generate force in their feet and then rotational force
all the way through.
That's how you're going to generate power. If you got a weight in your hand and you're throwing a punch, your punch is going to be off anyway, because you're not throwing punches with weights in your hand. You got 8 ounces on you at the most at a professional level if you're a boxer.
That's it. You're not throwing weight. You're generating.
You're generating force. Yeah. Exactly. So the ability to generate force quickly is how you generate power. But these guys they're like, here, like do a heavy landmine punch. It's like, just stop.
Well, and I feel like that's the other thing too. You're potentially putting people in a situation, if you don't really know what you're doing in terms of like, oh, I can make you stronger. But if you don't understand too the correlation between what things actually translate into combat sports, that's where like a regular strength and conditioning coach that doesn't understand combat sports can actually put people in a situation where, they can make them stronger, but they're actually putting them in bad habits. So like if you're doing these sort of things that, sure may make you stronger, but you're doing the movement differently to how you would throw a punch. And then you get used to like flaring, or you get used to like stopping here and not learning how to turn your hand over, or not learning how to push through.
Yeah, you're developing the wrong motor pathways. And
Yeah.
it just doesn't work.
Especially if you're doing that every day. You do like if you're doing strength conditioning a couple of times a week and you're doing that over and over again. It's very hard to undo.
Yeah, because eventually these things become instinct, and removing instinct is much harder than removing something you've just learnt yesterday.
Yeah.
So instinct and habits are harder to break than a new skill or something new that you've learned, because that can be overridden very easily.
Yeah.
But if you do something the same thing over and over again, that bad form becomes bad habit, which just becomes the instinct, and that's when you lose a fight.
Well, that's what happens in a fight. Like the funny thing is we train so much, we learn so much, and what you're able to even sort of do in the gym generally is, probably only 60, 70%, if that, of what you've learned. But then of what you can pull off in sparring in the gym, what you pull off in a fight, especially when you start fighting, is like 0.5%.
Yeah.
If you remember 2 techniques in your first fight, you're doing well.
Good. You're doing well. You get reduced to your baseline level
And it becomes instinct.
Exactly.
So you don't even think about what you're doing. You're just doing it. So if you set any kind of bad habits, and that's why like your coach will be on you about things constantly, is because at the end of the day, like they'll be on you about basics.
Hands
because
up. Like
the basics are what's going to happen. How you train is how you're going to fight.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. And like I've said to a few of the newer fighters at our gym, is like we will drill these basics so much, and the fundamentals are so important, because once they are super solid, they are what's going to win you a fight.
Absolutely.
That's 100%
None of the
what wins you a
fancy
fight.
stuff.
It's not the fancy shit. The fancy shit comes when you have such a solid foundation that will never leave your brain. You will always be able to do that. And then you can do the fancy shit, the cool spinning back kicks and stuff.
Yeah.
But also, those have been drilled so much that that's actually their base level.
Yeah, but then also too, I feel like the basics, like to pull off any fancy stuff, it has to be right place, right time, and you have to have usually set it up, and that comes from you've set it up from your basics,
Your fundamentals.
Yeah,
Your footwork, your head movement, your hands. Like keep all the most basic fundamentals that everyone's like, oh, this is boring. That's what wins you fights.
But see, I find it really funny because when you start off, that's when people tend to find that boring. But when you look at experienced fighters, they love it. They're like, I never get time to like just sit there and just go over that one thing.
Yeah.
Like all the people that are in it for the long haul obsess over the little things.
One of the reasons why I love shadowboxing. I love it. I will shadowbox. If I've got my microwave going for a couple minutes, heat up food, I'm shadowboxing. My girlfriend looks at me and goes, what are you doing, you idiot? I'm just practicing.
I feel like your household is very much like mine.
Yeah.
Both Jared and I do that.
Walking down the hallway, shadowboxing. And I tell new students, I tell people who have just like the freshest of fresh, and I get them to do shadowboxing, I'm like, you will feel like an idiot. But I promise you, this is one of the most important things you can do, because you can just do it anywhere, anytime, and constantly just reinforce those habits that we're teaching.
Yeah.
Just by doing it. And it costs you no money, no time. You can do it at any time, any place, anywhere, as long as you don't care how silly you look.
Yeah.
And just do it.
And then it becomes comfortable and normal.
Yeah.
I always struggled with it. Like, I've always hated shadow boxing. Yes, I know you remember this.
I do.
And it wasn't that I felt silly. It's just I had so much trouble with visualizing what I was meant to be doing, or visualizing what's happening, or, why I would need to do things, because I very much and still today when I fight, I adapt to what's happening in there. I don't necessarily go, this is what I have to do in there. So I get reads and I adapt and react. And obviously I'm not saying I'm just like a counter fighter or anything like that. I will absolutely be a pressure fighter, or I'll be whatever I have to be.
Yeah.
But relative to what is happening, and I'll take every opportunity that I see. But I found that part of it hard in terms of I kept thinking of it like I need to be replicating a fight rather than I can just use this as skill development to just go over the same thing.
Yeah.
Or initially you're like, what do? I don't know enough stuff.
Yeah, and that's one thing that a lot of people they have trouble with, is because when they're new, they don't know enough. So I'm just doing the same thing. I'm like, good, keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the more you do the same thing, the better you're going to be at that. And once you get really good at that, then you'll learn the next thing, and then you're going to feel like shit again. And that's great. There's nothing better than feeling like shit at a new technique, because it means you're learning. It's like when I first started
Yeah.
BJJ. I came from like at the time like 13 years of striking, and I was like, sometimes you think I'm king shit, and then you put on a gi, and then you're in a white belt, and then next thing you know, this guy that some accountant from God knows where is just choking you out with your own gi, and you're like, how the fuck? What is going on? Like some skinny dude that you think I would beat the shit out,
yeah,
and they just like turn you into a fucking pretzel involuntarily, and it's like I need to learn this. This is the thing. You like once you feel like shit, if you feel like shit at something, that's good because it means you have so much to learn, and that is the best feeling.
That's something I've talked about with a few people, and I actually touched base on it in the last podcast episode that I released around imposter syndrome and why, and reframing that to be like, well, imposter syndrome is a good thing because whenever you feel like that, it's because you're doing something you haven't done before. It's because you're doing something new.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I have massive imposter syndrome. I am a victim of that. I have been my whole life when I do new things. I'm like, I'm not good enough. And like now that I've come into coaching fighters as well, I often feel like, oh, I'm not good enough to do this. But then, they win or they learn or they do really well. I'm like, oh, maybe we're doing well. Even when like our fighters lose, they still do really well.
Yeah. Well, and, you see that progression. You see all that work that they've put in. You see the behind, like everything that went into it. And then you see it when they actually implement it and stuff as well.
Yeah. And even like being a fighter, I think every fighter probably has a bit of imposter syndrome. They think, especially when you're coming up, you're like, fuck, should I be doing this?
If you don't, I feel like that's very rare.
Yeah, you have supreme confidence or arrogance or hubris, I think. It's a very fine line between those three things as to what you are. Maybe you're one of those freaks who are just amazing at everything. But let's be honest, you're probably not.
But even then, I feel like even if you are John Jones, like I feel like mindset and working on your mental game is always hard, no matter how good you are.
Always. I think like we talked about this yesterday. Fighting is 90% mental. And yeah, that is always a challenge I think every athlete has is fighting that sort of mental game of am I good enough? Should I keep doing this? Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that we see it where, and like I was at a fight show last night and it's a story that gets told on almost every fight show, even at the elite level. You've got someone that is the fitter, faster, stronger, better athlete, got more skills, technically better. But the guy with the dog in him,
it's that grit.
Wins.
Yeah. When you have that, sometimes it's just all you need is that grit. If you're fit enough, strong enough, and you've done enough, the guy might be a little bit technically better than you. But if you can grit it out, if you have that dog in you,
you believe in yourself.
You're going to win fights. You'll go really far. Hard work will often beat pure talent.
Oh, it absolutely 100% will.
Yeah.
With time.
Yes, with time. Exactly. Yeah. That's the key thing.
Because talented people are talented from the beginning, whereas hard workers generally aren't. But that's what makes them hard workers because they never were given anything easy. But then when they rise to the occasion and when things get tough, that's normal. So when they face adversity, it's just like, well, I face adversity all the time. Whereas like when you're, I guess, super talented and you haven't had to work hard. I'm not saying that every talented person doesn't work hard.
No, they do.
If you're talented and work hard, they're the 1%ers.
That's your GSPs.
That's your John Jones. That's your like Khabib. That's your Volkanovski. Like at the end of the day, they're the top of the top. And that's what makes them very hard to beat.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, even the top outside of like, it's probably less than 1% probably. I'd say it's probably like 0.2% to be honest. Because they're still top like 10%. I reckon they're predominantly your hard workers. They're the people that consistently turn up no matter what. And I think that's where you see it in the gym. The people that just turn up every day, no matter what. Their progress may be, 1% compared to someone who's talented who picks things up super easy. But they generally only get so many fights in and then they face adversity or someone that's also hard working or talented or whatever, and I guess the mentality of coming back after a loss. That's a big one. Big difference between someone that's been grinding out and everything's been hard and facing adversity, and I that's what I tend to see versus someone that's been really talented and maybe not had to work as hard, and then the ego, I tend to find is a little bit different between those two types
I
of.
think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think you hit on a really important point is coming back after a loss. I feel like that is one of the biggest things that will show if someone actually has that grit in them, regardless of being talented or
Hardworking or whatever.
hardworking or less talented, for lack of a better term. If you don't have your grit, you're never going to go anywhere. You're not going to make it at all. When you lose a fight, that's when you know in yourself whether or not you want to keep doing it and whether or not you actually have it in you to accept that loss. Your ego will take a beating, but you'll be like, okay, let's learn from this loss and keep going, and then go to the gym, work on what I lost. Why did I lose the fight?
What do you take out of it? Do you take something out of it, or is there just excuses? Or even sometimes it's not even excuses. Some people is just like, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's not for me. I don't want to get hurt again.
Or I don't want to lose.
That too.
I find a lot of the time, like I don't know many people that have gone like, oh, I don't want to get hurt again, unless it's sort of like really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
I find more it's just like, I don't want to feel like that again. And honestly, like it does. It feels like part of you dies when you lose.
It's awful. My only loss so far, touch wood, was my third Muay Thai fight, and I was fighting heavier than I usually do against this big lad, Simon Mayet. He's a really good fighter. He's been around the kickboxing scene for quite a while. He's a beast. And he knocked me out the second round with an overhand, and he knocked me out cold. Like I fucking face planted on the ground.
I feel like it's a tough one because you don't even get to remember it.
No, I came to actually in the back room. I don't remember walking out of the ring. I was like, what the fuck happened? And I got told, and I was like, fuck, that's pretty rough. Hey, I saw the video, and I was like, that looks bad. Like, it was bad. And a lot of people, including actually my dad, he was like, this will be a big test for Dim as to whether or not he will continue. Like a lot of people thought, nah, he's done. Like Dim's not going to fight again. Next fight after that,
I didn't know you.
I beat the absolute hell out of my opponent. He went to decision because he was a tough dude, but I pieced him up for 3 rounds straight, just nonstop. And I won. When I won that fight, I was like, yeah, I ain't going anywhere. Yeah, fuck you guys.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's circle back. Let's talk about your striking career.
Yes.
Do you want to give us a bit of a rundown of, firstly, I think telling us what the journey was like, training into your first fight, and then let's have a chat about what you achieved on that end before we get into MMA.
All right. Yeah, easy. So like I said, I started Muay Thai when I was 17. I trained for a couple of years before my first fight because I was doing rugby and that at the same time. And then when I finished school, I went into training for fights full time. Like I was Monday to Friday.
You were still at school?
I just finished school now. So 2009 I graduated, and then that's when I stopped playing rugby and then just took up Muay Thai full time. Another year, and then my coach was like, I think you're ready to fight. Let's get you a fight. I'm like, cool, let's do it. So it took us a few months to find someone to fight, and we had a couple of people say yes, then no, and yes, then no. You know how it is. And then I remember I was at work, and I got a phone call from my coach. This is a Sunday, and he's like, got you a fight. You want to fight? I was like, yep, awesome. He goes, sweet, this weekend, Saturday. I was like,
why does it not surprise me at all?
Fuck, just standard. He's like, all right, no problem. He goes, you got to get down to 78 kilos. And I was like, all right, cool. I got to lose 8 kilos in 4 days. So
fun.
first ever fight, 8 kilos in 4 days. And I had no idea about the weight cutting process. This is 2010. So 13 years ago.
So who did you go to for advice? Obviously your coach to begin with.
And my coach was like,
help you?
My coach was like, you'll be right, mate. Don't worry about it. Just eat a little bit less.
He didn't really give you much direction.
Because Pete was real old school. He was literally just like,
eat less,
sweat it out, you'll be sweating.
Run.
Yep.
Yeah,
real old school.
Did you have a garbage bag or did you have a sweatsuit?
I did the garbage bag.
Did?
I did. I cut a couple of holes in the garbage bag, put it over, jump over the top, started running. I basically, as soon as that phone call finished, I put down my bacon and egg roll that I was eating, threw it out and be like, all right, guess I'm not eating for a week. And so finished work that day, garbage bag, went for a run, and then I didn't do it the best way. Like I was pretty much starved myself and sweating it out every day until that. I made the weight, but that was rough.
How did you feel?
I felt awful.
Yep.
I felt awful. And like looking back on it, I did everything wrong you could possibly do in a weight cut.
Hey, we've all been there.
Yeah, like any professionals out there at the moment, particularly like, the fight dietitian, all those guys, if they saw what I did to cut weight for my first fight, they would cringe so hard. It
would be
awful.
the same for me with my second fight.
Yeah, it was so bad. But I made the weight.
Shout out to Ryan, by the way, as well. He's our
the
boy.
Man. He's the man. I made the weight, and then I obviously also did all the wrong things when it came to refueling. But whatever.
What did you do? Straight for burgers or?
Straight for like heaps of pasta.
Pasta, of course.
But I just such a carb coma, and I felt so sick. And then so that night I was so nervous all day for this fight. I was like packing my dacks. Hey, get to the fight venue. I was first fight of the night, so it was first up. And I swear to God, I had to take like 100 nervous pees.
Yeah,
kept going to the bathroom. I was going to piss. I got to piss. And then I got my hands wrapped up, gloves on, and I was like, well, I can't piss now. And my coach is like, I'm not holding it for you, mate, so you better hold it until afterwards.
I'm just going to point this out here, guys. I know that any other fighters will absolutely understand
100%.
this, but this is something that's super common that everyone goes through.
Yeah.
Is like trying to time when you're going to go to the bathroom.
It's so
because
bad.
once you got your hands wrapped, number one, that gets a bit difficult. Like you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to end up with pee on my wrap or anything. But then obviously, once you've got your gloves on too, you're just like, oh,
good luck.
Okay, so you're like trying to think about when you're going to get them on and get them, because you've got to get them taped up and signed off and stuff by the officials. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing, yeah. And anyway, we called my name out. I went out. And my coach, this has always stuck with me. Pete was like, that ring is your house. This is your house. He's coming into your house. You own that fucking ring. So I did. I walked in there.
That.
Yeah, it was cool. And that has always stuck with me. And I pass that on to all the other fighters that I train, that we've trained for their fights. I say the same thing. This is your house. He's coming into your house. You own this ring.
I love that. Just sidebar. One of the really cool things I heard a coach say to a fighter, because I'm always not necessarily like best friends with my opponents, but I love to support my opponents as well. Like outside of our fight, like I will wish them good luck at weigh-ins. Like other than from the moment that the bell goes to the moment it stops, then that's business. But and a lot of people always sort of ask me, well, how can you do that? How can you just flip the switch? How can you be friends with them? And then all of a sudden, all of that kind of stuff. And I really, really like this piece of advice I heard a coach tell a fighter. They're like, that guy is talented. That guy's going to go really far. But tonight's not his night.
That's cool. I like
Tonight
that.
is your night. And you can know that he is a great fighter and he is talented and he will make it, and we all make it in life. And we can all have success. But tonight is your night, not his night. He will have his night on another night.
That's
and you can clap for him on another night.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
I was like, that's so cool, because that's like respectful and being like in two ways, like respectful to your opponent, but respectful that, this is going to be a war. You're fighting someone who is high level and they will be successful, but tonight is not that night. And also just the bit that he put on the end that is like, you can clap for him on another night.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was like,
I like
that's badass,
Yeah.
and I think that that's the kind of thing you want to see in the sport as well. So yeah, that's always stuck with me.
I like that. That's really cool.
Yes.
So anyway, get into the ring, and my opponent walks out, and my coach is very non-traditional Muay Thai. Like we don't do the white crew dance or anything like that. None of that. We just stand in the corner and watch.
You never wore a Mong Kong or anything like that?
Nah,
Yeah.
none of that. Pete was not very traditional. He was just like, mate,
That's a lot more common now though.
Yeah,
too.
he's from Cooma. He used to ride bulls. He's a country boy. He's like, we just want to get in there and fight. I was like, yeah, right, fair enough. Anyway, and I remember staring across this guy and thinking to myself, why the fuck am I doing this? I was terrified. I was like,
fight feels.
yeah, I was like, holy shit. Bell goes, I come out, and we go into each other, and I threw this like shitty outside leg kick as a southpaw, and he just cracks me in the face with a straight right, and I said, right, well, we're in a fight. And that was it. And talking about like, base instincts, I just started going. I was like, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah.
30 seconds in, and I felt like my arms and legs were made of lead.
Adrenaline dump.
101. Shitty weight cut. I was like, oh my God. I was just lucky that I was a little bit fitter than him. And I just kept putting the pressure on, kept hitting him, kept kicking him. Won that fight on points. And I just remember thinking, what just happened? Like, I barely even remember the fight. It felt so fast. I don't remember a single thing that was said to me between rounds from the coach. I don't remember hearing my coach's voice, nothing. I just went out and just kept going.
I feel that. Like my first MMA fight, I could barely, like, my coach was a soft-spoken person anyway. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear, like, I had to learn how to listen for coaches because I didn't hear them even, like, my first 4 fights. But apparently I was doing what he was yelling.
That's what matters.
But I don't think that was because I heard him. It's because I just did what we had been drilling and working, which was, as we talked about, instinct.
Yeah.
You know, so like, and I had just adapted and seen what was happening in the fight and went, oh, there's an opportunity to do that and just do it. Like, I don't think it was I needed to hear it anyway because it's the things that you'd worked on. But yeah, so welcome to Adrenaline Dump.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, okay, that's a thing. And then after that, I sort of learned to train a bit better.
Yeah.
And we had more nerves for a fight. So the second fight I had, it was completely different, hey. I was so much calmer. I had more time to cut the weight, so I made the weight so much easier. So I felt better. Got into the ring so this is one of those fights where my opponent didn't weigh in at the same time as me. We stood across from each other and I was like, you're a big lad. Like, he's a big Islander fella. And like, I was like, holy fuck, this guy's huge.
You're like, how are we in the same weight division?
We were not.
You're like,
I am still convinced that he did not weigh in at 78 kilos. But anyway, whatever. Still beat him. So that fight was great. Like, I was moving much better. I was much smarter with my movement. I barely got hit in that fight. Just kept in and out, moving around. The only thing that he got me with 2 times was 2 groin kicks.
Oh, and that's rough.
The first one he got me and he dropped me. And that fucking hurt. This is in the last round too. And we got up.
Both in the last round.
Yeah, I got up. It kept going. And then he just I swear he just fucking straight punted me right up. Like, not even trying to kick me in the leg. And he actually split the box with that kick. He hit me that hard. Yeah, I was on the deck for a good couple of minutes. And I got really, really mad that he kicked me again. So as soon as I got up, all technique went out the window. I just
You're like, this is just a brawl now.
Yeah, I just bull rushed him. Like, I bull rushed him, 1-2 rib kick clinch, and then I did not stop kneeing him in the face until the end of the round. Like, he was stuck in the corner. I just kneed him probably about 10, 12 times over and over and over again. Bell went, ref pulls apart, and he was all like, oh, mad. And I was like, I just fucked you up. Shut up, bitch.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won that fight, and apparently I retired him after that fight. I broke a couple of his ribs, and he was like, I'm never fighting again.
Wow.
So, I was like, well, you break my box, I break your ribs, and break your career. So
that must have been kind of satisfying.
It was, yeah. I actually bumped into him a few weeks later, and he was like, hey, man, so good to see you. I was like, oh, you too, bro. Oh, we're cool. All right, sweet. No worries. No hard feelings. Cool.
I feel like it's really funny navigating interactions in the combat sports world because it is so small.
It's very small, yeah.
And because there's such different types of personalities, like if you're someone that just gets along with people and whatever, but I guess it can be a bit confronting when you start because everybody does know everybody.
Yeah.
Or at least knows someone that you know. Once you start, you realize that the combat sports community is so small. So yeah, you definitely will run into everybody
all the time. Yeah. Or you're talking about someone like, oh yeah, I trained with him. I was like, oh, I beat your boy up. My bad.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think you learn though not to take it personally. Like, I was speaking with someone recently about that kind of stuff about taking things personally or whatever. And we're talking about walkout songs, and I was sort of saying I actually found it really funny. I've had quite a few because I choose my walkout song for me. It's the same one every time these days, and it's what gets me ready, gets me pumped. It reminds me because like the lyrics and stuff reminds me that it's probably going to be really, really fucking tough in there. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it, and you're going to love it and whatever. It gets me pumped up, ready to go. So my walkout song is for me. But there's been quite a lot of times where it was quite clear as well my opponent's walkout song was for me too. Because, the lyrics or the particular songs were all about, hurting someone or that they, there's, going to be, an upset or, whatever. There were all songs and I was like, cool. My song's for me and your song's for me. So
Fun little fact. Until my last MMA fight, I had never chosen my walkout song.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Why?
I just don't care.
So you just like give me anything, or do you let someone else pick?
Well,
Did you let your family pick?
no one's ever picked a song
No.
except for the last one. So my MMA fight, Ryan was like, just go Protect Your Neck by Wu-Tang Clan. I'm like,
Yeah,
cool, whatever,
done.
I don't care. I genuinely don't care about the song because this might sound, I don't know, silly or strange or whatever. When I'm walking out to the ring or the cage, I don't hear the music anyway.
Yeah.
There's only one thing I'm looking at as the person in the cage. Like I tend to not stop looking at that person as I'm walking towards the cage, even around, until I have to look at the referee and they're talking to me. And then I walk in the cage and I just keep looking at them.
So do those moments, that whole walkout, getting announced or whatever, does that go by super quick for you when you think back and you look at it? Like if I asked you a question of something that happened, you would have no clue.
Yeah. Because to me, I just want to get in the ring or cage and do what I want to do.
I feel like you're one of two people. It's like it's either that, and I feel like when you first start fighting, it's like that for everyone.
Yeah.
Like you definitely don't remember those moments. I've gone the complete opposite now.
Yeah, you're more relaxed.
Yeah, super relaxed, but I just like the fight's going to happen no matter what. These moments go by in a blink of an eye and you don't remember them.
Yeah.
But I now take them in as being like, I'm going to take in and be super present for every second of this. And that's why when I get in the cage, I'm like super calm.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm never stiff and I'm never like, let's like whatever. And I use that so it flows into how I perform in the cage, that I'm already like, I'm relaxed, I'm happy, I'm, comfortable, I'm calm, I'm not stiff, I can flow. But also just because I'm like, I want to take in these small moments now.
Yeah.
I want to be present when, someone announces me and stuff. I want to, I actually look and I point to people that are there to support me when I'm walking out. And, I actually listen for my music now. And that kind of ties me and into that same like flow state or whatever.
That's great.
Now, so that's why I use the same song over and over again. And because that song now means so much to me.
Yeah.
But to begin with, I feel like everyone starts off that.
For me, I'm not like tense. I'm like, oh, it's just like
focused.
I genuinely don't care about the music because the music's not going to make me fight better or worse. I also don't listen to music when I train.
Yeah.
If I go for a run, I don't listen to music.
Podcast?
I don't listen to anything.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. I don't listen to music because I've heard this, I can't remember where I heard it from, but if people rely on music or sound or something like that, artificial sound when they're training to get themselves motivated, and this isn't saying that you need the music to get motivated for a fight, but this is how I just have kind of evolved and developed this sort of thought process is, what happens if your earphones die mid-run? Are you just going to stop your run?
Very similar to like people having traditions or what's the word?
Superstitions
and stuff.
What happens if they go wrong?
Yeah.
So
or having to plan out and do everything in a certain order on fight day, or like if something. I'm very similar. Like I don't listen to music out the back.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, me neither.
I do when I like weight cut or things like that. More so to take my mind off
burn
it.
the time off. Yeah, I did the same thing when I'm cutting weight. For example, I put on something, a podcast or a TV show or something like that, just to literally kill time because I'm like sitting there sweating and it sucks. But when I'm training or like walking out to the ring, the music isn't making a difference to whether or not we're fighting.
Yeah.
I'm focused on the fight and I'm not listening to the music because I'm focusing on the fight. I'm focusing on my opponent. So I don't care what song. You can play fucking Barbie Girl for all I care. I won't notice. I'll probably have a bit of a giggle and be like, okay, whatever. I'm still going into the ring and I'm still fighting.
I go into that same state as soon as the fight starts. As soon as the fight starts, the literal place or the cage that I'm fighting in could be burning down and I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't even know that the ref is there except for when the ref's like doing something.
Yeah, they become just a figure on the
unless they get in the way. Like I have almost like run into a couple of refs, but that's because I literally don't know they're there.
Yeah.
Because it is like, to explain it to people who haven't fought, it is like that. Like anything and everything, even though you're fighting in front of, a room full of people and they can be screaming and like people will ask fighters like, oh, did you hear me screaming?
No.
Mate, I don't hear anything or anyone. Like I have no clue. Like fighters have to learn to listen for their coach and it's only because day in and day out they're listening to them and they're hearing them and it becomes that subconscious thing that they can hear and decipher like that noise through the crowd. So it's so funny. Then people are like, how can you hear your coach over people yelling and screaming?
I've trained myself too.
But it's like that's the only thing that you'll usually hear. Like
absolutely. And then when you do, suddenly it's really funny when you think back on your fights. Your coach's voice is like a clarion bell. It is so clear. Everything else is sort of like just this muffled white noise. But you always hear, you can even hear your coach's voice over their coach's voice, and they're basically the same proximity from you. But you don't hear them, but you hear your coach.
Yeah, well, I actually feel like I unlocked a new state of awareness because I've been working with a mental coach and stuff as well, because I just think it's a good idea to focus on mental performance, because we all do have those struggles like imposter syndrome and then having those fleeting thoughts of like, am I good enough, you know, or whatever. It's not usually about the opponent. It's usually all an internal thing, like that internal battle and struggle and, you know. But yeah, like when I went and fought in Adelaide, like I've always struggled to hear my coaches. It's something I have to actively try and do, which can be a bad thing if you're trying to actively listen for it and you're not focusing on what you're doing. So it's like I'd rather just do But I've obviously learnt to listen to them. But I was so hyper aware in my fight down in Adelaide. I was listening to what my opponent's corner was saying to her and reacting before she could. Like,
that's great.
Or knowing what she was about to do. And yeah, it was just something really, really cool that I, you know, hadn't really done before, but it was just like unlocking those sort of different levels and stuff. It's just like, yeah, why doesn't everybody get a bloody mental performance coach to like help? Because
super underrated.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean like it's the same as anything else. You get out what you put in though. So don't think that you can pay someone to make you the most confident person in the world or make you
have to put the work in.
Yeah. So it's the same as like a strength and conditioning coach can write you the greatest program ever.
If you don't do it, it ain't going to work.
Yeah. And the same thing, like people can teach you how to punch, but if you don't put in the hard work to learn how to fight, like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's really funny how you said you heard your opponent's coach. I did have that once in one fight where I got annoyed at their coach because we're fighting and I was starting to tee off on my opponent a bit, and his coach was like, keep moving, he's getting tired about me.
You're like, no, I'm not.
I actually said, I'm getting tired, am I? And then just started hitting him more. I was like, am I getting tired yet? And I was talking shit.
I love that.
They threw in the towel in that fight, and I was like, I wasn't getting tired, and he was like, yeah, okay, fair enough.
You're like, thanks guys, you just unlocked another level
I got
me.
so pissed. I was like, fuck you, I'm not getting tired. I'm fit as fuck.
I'm going to finish your boy now.
Yeah. And they threw in the towel. I was like, yeah, fuck you. It was really good.
Actually, when I went over to Amsterdam for the Gamma World Championships, obviously I didn't have a coach, so the other coaches that were there for the rest of the Australian team jumped in and coached me. And I was really, really worried about like not knowing their voices or anything. So I was doing that whole thing of trying to be hyper focused on listening to them, to the point that they would be like, do this, and I'm mid fight going, yep, audibly.
That's
and
really funny.
you can actually watch it on the footage where they're like, you know, like 1, 2, and then go for a takedown. I'm like, yep. and then in between rounds, they're like, you don't have to answer us. Like, just keep worrying what you're doing in the fight. And I was like, oh, okay, sorry.
That's so good. sorry. We one of our guys, Charlie, who had his last fight, he lost, but it was a tough fight. We were calling out instructions to him, and he's great. He's very coachable. But he was getting a little bit frustrated in that fight because his opponent was running. Let's be honest, he was running the whole time. And I was like, Charlie, do this, and he'd be like, I'm like, don't look at me, look at him. Like, stop it, don't look at us, look at him and do it. And he's like, oh, okay.
That's such a thing too, that like when you're sparring in the gym, every single person has done that. Like when you're first learning and you're sparring and you're learning how to be coached, that you need to learn to, and again, as we talked about, listening.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like that thing generally in life when someone speaks to you, you turn and you look at them. You know, and you address them because they're talking.
Look at me.
But like, it's something you have to unlearn.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because it always makes me sort of think about interactions that people have with fighters, and that potentially like fighters get to a point where sometimes people are speaking to them and they'll be like, Dim's having a conversation with me and I can fully have a conversation with him like this, not speaking, not looking at him, and I can still be just doing whatever I'm doing. And then, you know, people might think that you're rude, but you're now at this point where you're like, that's super normal.
Yeah. To be fair, I still struggle with multitasking because I'm just a terrible multitasker. But
Male.
listen to yeah. Let's be true. It's totally fair. I can't multitask, but I can when I'm fighting.
Yes.
Yeah, I can listen to my coach and fight at the same time. I do like having fun with new people. When they're sparring me and like say the coach is like giving me instruction, they turn around, look, I'll do something silly, like I'll get right up close to their face with my hand in their face, and they're like, oh fuck, and I'm like, don't look away from me, bro.
That could have been a punch.
I would have knocked you out, and they're like, oh, okay. I love messing with the new people in that way. Like nothing malicious, just like you got to have fun sometimes.
Oh, and I think that's really good and important for new people to break that up a little bit and have a bit of fun too, because sometimes it can be a bit confronting for new people.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I think is super important that people should understand is one, when you find a gym with the right vibe that treat new people well, you found a gem.
Yeah.
You found a gem of a gym because they're rare. You walk into a gym where
it's like a hierarchy or something.
it's a hierarchy and this stupid fucking attitude, which I hate. And I've gone to a few gyms. I'm like, I'm not training here because
everyone's equal.
They like the people who've been there for ages, or the fighters, or the black belts, or the whatever
They're
brown
too
belts.
good to train with the new people.
Or they thrash the new people. It's like you're first of all damaging the reputation of your own gym. You're damaging the reputation of the sport, and you're kind of hamstringing yourself. Like first of all, the gym's a bit of a business too. Why are you thrashing the new people? They're the people that are going to bring the gym up better with also revenue, but also just having more people to train with. If you train your new people better, they become better training partners.
Well, some of the best training partners in any gym that I've ever been at are people that don't fight, but they just genuinely love it, and they genuinely love helping fighters get ready, or they just like they're lifers.
Yeah.
So they've been training for years and they're technically great, or they just fighting's not for them, and fighting is not for majority of people. Like it's a very small percentage of people.
It's really hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. And as we talk about mentally, because this is one thing I talk about when people sort of say, you know, there's always the people that come in and go, how long till you can get me a fight, that kind of stuff. And they think, you know, oh, I've been in heaps of fights, you know, nights out and stuff. It's like, yeah, okay. Well, one, that's not an actual fight against someone that's been training and skilled. But two, a fight on a night out or whatever just happens. There's no build up. There's nothing mentally. It just happens, and, you know, happens then and there, they react. Cool, awesome, whatever. It's very, very different when you know at this day, this time, this location, this person, I'm going to have to fight for my life in front of a crowd of people. And maybe you've seen footage of them knocking people out or breaking people's arms or whatever. And you know that they're training. They're like, their whole focus is on beating you up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think it gets people, because people can do the training, like the training's tough and that weeds out a lot of people.
Yep.
Having that ego, as we talked about, like getting hurt of like being bad at something, because people have this inherent idea that fighting is easy, and I don't understand it.
They watch too much Hollywood TV.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, like this is how a fight would go. And like, I get punched in the face, I'll just come back and hit him. It's like, that's not how it works, man.
Yeah, but like the difference is, like, I consider combat athletes, specifically MMA, but in general combat athletes, to be the greatest athletes on the planet, because in MMA, like in other sports, there's a particular set of attributes that make you successful. So swimmers, the best swimmers all have basically the same body type and attributes, long arms, you know, long legs, strong and powerful, all of that kind of stuff. You look at runners, like short distance runners, generally they all have a similar body type versus long distance, whatever it is. There's usually a certain, like basketballers are all generally tall. All the great ones, like a couple of outliers and everything, but there's a general way that you train. There's a general attributes for each sport. MMA, there isn't that. You have to be everything. You can't just be strong. You have to still be fast. You have to be mobile. You have to be explosive. You have to have endurance and a gas tank and cardio, and you need to have both aerobic and anaerobic as well. You need to do everything, and then it's also that mental side of it, of being able to put all of that together. So I consider MMA athletes and combat athletes the greatest athletes on the planet.
I actually will agree with you on that. I think they're some of the greatest well-rounded athletes when it comes to utilizing all systems of their body to be great at their sport.
Yeah, and I just don't understand, like, this is why I don't generally go and watch fights at like a pub or whatever. But like the things that you hear someone watch a title fight, a world title fight, and they'll be like, yeah, give me 6 months and I could beat him. And I'm like, bro.
Or even just like, oh, you should have done that. It's like, you fucking do it then.
But I would never hear someone say, give me 6 months and I could beat Roger Federer in a tennis match.
Yeah, yes.
No one would ever say that.
No.
But people think that they can fight, that like, oh, if I had to, I'd just, black out and, whatever it is. I'll see red or I'll black out or whatever, adrenaline. And like they think that everybody can fight. But like you've got people who have dedicated their lives. That's all they do all day, every day. And on top of that, they're the greatest athletes around. And you think that you can be better than them? Like, give me 6 months. I'm like, bro, I'll give you 2 years and you couldn't beat me, let alone beat them. Like,
yeah, it's crazy. I think people are very disillusioned by their abilities, for sure.
All right, let's circle back.
Okay.
Finish telling me about your career,
yes.
striking. What did you achieve? Because you achieved a lot.
I did, yeah. I did a lot. So after that loss, like my second fight, my loss, I went on a bit of a tear. Third fight, sorry, I lost. I went on a bit of a tear. I didn't lose any more fights. And I started getting invited to fight like up and down the east coast of Australia. And I ended up getting a few titles. So I've got, I had New South Wales, ACT, and East Coast title in all amateur, but still, I'm very proud of those achievements.
100%.
And
Fights are fun.
after that third fight where I won by points, I didn't win a single fight by points after that. So I finished every one of my fights. And going back to why, I was kicking the shit out of people. Like I was winning fights by leg kick TKOs, all to the point where they couldn't defend themselves, and I finished them with punches. So I'm not a knockout guy. I haven't got the Francis Ngannou knockout power, but I hit you hard enough that it really hurts, and I've got a really good gas tank, so I'll punch you a lot, hurt you a lot, but when I kick you, it's
volume. And as you talked about placement, like I feel like it's like if Max Holloway also kicked a lot, like and the equivalent of that, but like in kicks as well. Like.
So I remember. So I won my first title. It was the ACT title, and I finished him. I can't remember his name, to be honest, but I finished him with leg kicks. So it was 5 kicks the entire time in the fight, and so I finished him with 5 leg kicks. That was great. I got my New South Wales title, where it was first round TKO, where I knocked him down in the clinch, actually. So in the clinch, I overhand him once, I rocked him, and then I gave him a quick 1-2 over his, because he had the clinch on me, knocked him down, and then he came back up, and I kind of rushed him because he was quite tall, so I had to get in his guard, and I clinched him, and I kept on knee. I get the whole kneeing thing. I fucking love knees. Kneed the absolute living daylights out of him, where I cut him from hairline to eyebrow, big slice down his head. And the ref was like, yeah, no, you're done, bro.
Yeah.
That's it. And then East Coast title was leg kicks again, finished him with leg kicks, and that was it. Finished him hard. He was like, no, I can't walk anymore. That's it, I'm done.
Were all of these before CSA came in?
When was it? I think so.
So did you have to wear headgear?
I wore
elbow
headgear,
pads?
no elbow pads, because can you close the door? Sorry, cats will get out. My bad. Sorry.
No, you're all good.
Just close the glass door. Yeah. Little bastards. I knew that was going to happen. Sorry.
No, you're all good.
I had to wear headgear for my ACT title fight, but it was rugby headgear.
No way.
Yeah, so it was really funny. This is like
familiar for you.
Back in the days where like we got away with a few little things like, oh, we had to wear headgear, but they were pushing it to not, and yes and no. And what we managed to get away with was, all right, we'll wear footy headgear, which was actually better because I don't like boxing headgear because I feel like it restricts your vision a bit.
Oh, you got no peripherals, and you can't feel like if you bring your hand to your face, peripherals this way and down, you can't see uppercuts.
Yeah, I just think it just takes away from. I think it's actually more dangerous.
Can't hear either.
Yeah, and end of the day, it doesn't stop concussion, just stops cuts.
God no.
Whereas the rugby headgear stops the cuts, makes the officials happy, and you can still see.
Yeah.
So whatever, didn't help him because I still cut him from eyebrow to so cut him open nicely. I didn't wear elbow pads. Didn't have to wear elbow pads, which was nice. So
But were you fighting with elbows?
no, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Did you fight any of those fights with elbows?
None of my fights were with elbows. So
Interesting.
I kept asking to fight with elbows, and nobody wanted to fight with elbows. Everyone's like, "Oh, let's do K1 and Muay Thai." I was like, "Oh, fine." I just wanted to fight. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, I'll do whatever.
yeah.
Just give me the fight.
Never actually got an opportunity to fight full elbows. But then, last fight I fought, what was that one? That was in Sydney. I won that fight. And then I was prepping for another fight when I blew my ACL. In between these fights, I took a couple of years off here and there. I traveled Europe and did the Europe thing and lived over there for a while. And then came back. And then, my first fight back is when I blew my ACL. And that was pretty much the end of my Muay Thai career from there. So
Yeah.
once I finished that recovery, that's actually when I started moving into MMA.
But the thing is, though, you always had an interest in MMA because, like, part of the reason why I trained with you, like, I wouldn't have trained with you if you didn't have an understanding or a knowledge of MMA because if you, like, you kind of see it, like, you need to understand that MMA striking is different.
It's so different.
And, like, I'm not going to do high checks.
No.
You know, I'm not going, and it's the same with, like, if you're learning some boxing techniques. We're not going to be bobbing and weaving way under because I'm going to get kicked in the face or knee or,
knee.
you know, with your high checks and stuff, you're going to get taken down, all of those kind of things. And, you know, that was part of the reason that I really enjoyed training with you too is because we got to work lots of striking, but you were never trying to force me to do techniques that weren't useful to MMA. And then also, you know, you had that understanding of what translates.
Yeah.
And because you had that understanding of MMA anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I was obsessed with like MMA and the UFC from like the early days. So when the UFC was first, I think it was King of the Cage when they first started. I was really young and my dad used to watch it and I could hear him watch it, but he wouldn't let me watch it. He was like, "Nah, it's too violent for you." And I was only like 12, 13.
I'll just listen to it.
So what happened was a few years later, I think it was around about 14 or 15, I ended up renting a whole bunch of the like original UFC DVDs from the video shop because I had my L's I was driving by then or just. So I'd go down to the video shop, get some DVDs of UFC fights. Like we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And bring them home. And I'd watch them in my bedroom when Dad was away fishing. So he didn't know I was watching them. And I became obsessed. Like, oh man, I was so obsessed with all the OGs, right?
Yeah.
And then like I just kept going. I became obsessed. And then one time Dad found it and it was like, it probably would have been better if he caught me watching porn and then watching it. He was like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Oh," he's like, "That's too violent for you." I was like, "Oh, fuck nuts, I'm 16. And then he sort of just accepted. He's like, "All right, whatever." And then, I just became like completely obsessed with MMA. So even before I'd even started Muay Thai, I was watching UFC MMA fights and I loved it. It was awesome.
Even before you'd started training
Yeah.
or, you know, it's a kind of really cool memory, I guess, for you to look back now and go, yeah.
I was obsessed with it.
From the moment you saw it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I loved it.
But
I thought it was
didn't have
so
any
cool.
thought process that you were going to be a fighter?
No, I had no idea.
Same.
I just was loving watching it. I was like, this is so cool. Mel might walk in, by the way, but that's okay.
She's allowed to. She lives here.
Yeah, that's my girlfriend. You'll see my girlfriend and the dog. I remember like watching it and I remember seeing someone pull, I can't remember who the fighter was, but they pulled a flying triangle. I think it was actually on Coleman, like the grandfather of ground and pound back in the day. And I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?
Like, what is this?
And
This is
then
amazing.
This is like superpower." And it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was like, "What?" And then fast forward a couple of years after rugby and then I became obsessed with striking. And then when I started BJJ, I was like, "Oh, this is a superpower."
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, buddy.
Hello.
You all right?
You're all good.
Guest appearances. Good boy.
So, I had been pressuring Dim for a long time. I was like, "You need to do MMA." I was like, "You need to try wrestling because I honestly think you'll love it and you'll be really, really good at it."
Yeah, it's awesome.
We'll say I called it.
You did. You absolutely did. It was funny how the catalyst for me to start MMA was getting
An
a
injury.
pretty major injury.
And just like that, we have reached the end of episode number 5. And I know, we were just getting to the juicy part, but I promise you, We will pick up exactly where we left off in the next episode, and you can hear all about how a pretty significant injury actually led Dim to make the transition to MMA. Very interesting story, and we will release the next episode pretty soon, so stay tuned. As always, if you do like our content, please continue to engage with the podcast on any and all platforms, because the more you engage, the easier it is for other people to be able to find the podcast. So I will see you again very, very soon in the second half of this interview when I bring you episode number 6 of the Drop Bear Downpour podcast. Until then, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are tuning in to the podcast. I'll see you soon.